Okay, I want to talk about a recent revised statement I received from my anonymous source, the one I always talk about on here. This person is a ex-military electronics engineer who did work for various government agencies and defense contractors, and including DARPA, NASA, the CIA, and also defense contractors. He did all kinds of work like that. And now he's retired. He doesn't want to be bothered. He doesn't want, but he has some ideas. I understand. He said he doesn't want the phone calls. He doesn't want his colleagues, contacting him and say, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" So he wants to get his messages out privately, and he contacts me, and I've actually talked to this person on the phone. This person is a real person, and I know sometimes people ask me about this, and no, this guy, I've received the adequate information that shows that he says who he was, or he's retired now, but I've seen enough information to know that he's telling the truth about his background. Anyhow, basically, he sent me basically a statement. It was a revised statement. He actually sent me something similar before, and I just want to, we'll go over it right now and see what you think. A History of Deception. The passage of Truman's National Security Act of 1947 created the NSA and the CIA and a new level of internal secrecy to be called compartmentalized special access programs. These would be funded entirely off the books in order to remain completely hidden from any accounting or governmental oversight. As we have now learned, one of the first programs of this type was Majestic 12. Now let's return to July 8th, 1947 for some brief details about the handling of the Roswell materials. Major Marcel brought some of the debris to Base Commander Colonel Blanchard, who thought it was a great discovery. He informed Public Information Officer Lieutenant Walter Haut, who issued a press release stating that a flying saucer had just been recovered near Roswell, New Mexico. Major Marcel was then ordered to fly the materials to Fort Worth to be delivered to General Roger Ramey. Once there, he was told by Ramey that a cover-up story had to be concocted to the effect that the debris was only the wreckage of a weather balloon. Ramey then had debris from a weather balloon scattered on the floor of his office and invited the press to take photographs. This proved to be very effective, and public attention seized for many years. However, in one of the photos taken that day, computer enhancement now enables us to read part of a teletype message that General Ramey is holding in his hand. Bits and pieces of that message tell a very different story. Some of the phrases which are visible include the following: "Disk is next new find, the victims of the wreck, the disk they will ship, or C-47 right AF, Roswell, CIC team said this, imitate meaning of story, send out PR of weather balloon, they add land different crews." The photographic enlargement of this teletype message, as held by General Ramey in his office on July 9, 1947, is now in the public domain and available for viewing. Clearly, Ramey is being told to send the materials to Wright-Patterson and to create the weather balloon cover story. For any not familiar with military jargon, a C-47 is a transport aircraft. AF means airfield, CIC means the Counterintelligence Corps, and PR means press release. Within days, the alien disc and bodies were delivered to Wright-Patterson, which at that time was one of the Air Force's premier technical and scientific facilities. The commander of the base was General Nathan Twining, who later in 1947 issued the infamous Twining-Shulgin memo. General Shulgin was the commander of Army Air Force intelligence at that time. The memo said, "Flying discs are something real, not fictitious or imaginary." It went on to describe the discs in some detail, then instructed Shulgin to report any new sightings that might occur. This memo is not a hoax or a bogus document. It was released from the National Archives in Washington, D.C. many years later as a result of a Freedom of Information Act request. Unfortunately, the public continued to report UFOs and concern was mounting, so even while Twining was alerting Shulgin to the fact that UFOs were indeed real, he received orders to perform a study which would refute their existence and quiet things down. Therefore, General Twining initiated Project Sign, and in 1949, Air Force intelligence at Wright-Patterson issued a report which said that virtually all UFOs were attributable to ordinary causes and were of no concern. Now, I just want to stop there for a second and saying here they were of no real concern, actually. That Project Sign actually determined that they concluded that these objects were interplanetary, that they were coming from outer space. That's what they determined. But that report never made it to the public. It made it to the highest echelons of the Pentagon, and then it was batted back down. And then, of course, nothing came out of it, just like it says here. Anyway, continuing. Project Sign failed to alleviate public anxiety, so another report was deemed necessary. Once again, the task fell to General Twining. He initiated Project Grudge in 1949, which concluded decisively that there was absolutely no evidence that UFOs exist, and such reports were due entirely to misidentifications, hoaxes, or people suffering from mental illness. General Twining is believed to be one of the original members of Majestic 12. He went on to become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Another original member was Secretary of Defense James Forrestal. He advocated revealing the truth of UFOs to the American people, but it never happened. I just want to stop there for a second. Now, I don't know anything about that. I've never read that. James Forrestal, that's just rumor. From what many people believe. I mean, I think it's not, some people have thought this, but whether it's true or not, it's unknown. Apparently, he did suffer from mental illness, and I could tell you, mental illness could happen to anybody. Actually, and it doesn't matter if you're the Secretary of Defense or you're a homeless person on the street. It doesn't matter who you are. Mental illness could strike at anyone. Anyway, continuing. Forrestal advocated revealing the truth of UFOs to the American people, but it never happened. Instead, he fell to his death from a window of Bethesda Naval Hospital in 1949. Although deemed a suicide at the time, it is now regarded as very suspicious. Indeed, I'll stop there for a second. Indeed, it is regarded as very suspicious. I mean, if you read the circumstances of this guy's suicide, I mean, for one thing, if he was suffering from mental illness, why did they have him on so high up in a building? I mean, he should have been on a lower floor, so jumping from a building wouldn't be an option for him. But and actually there were other aspects. If you read about his death, it was very suspicious. Anyway, continuing. Public concern over UFOs continued into the 1950s, especially following the 1952 mass overflight of the United States Capitol. Therefore, in 1952, yet another UFO investigation began with the name of Project Blue Book. As usual, it was managed at Wright-Patterson, and again, it concluded that there was absolutely no evidence that UFOs were extraterrestrial spacecraft or represented any threat to national security. Reports of UFOs increased during the 1960s, so the next attempt to discredit them was the so-called Condon Report. It was funded by the United States Air Force from 1966 to 1968. The new wrinkle would be the idea of using allegedly objective independent scientists, in this case from the University of Colorado. Not surprisingly, the conclusion was that all UFO reports were absolute nonsense and were unworthy of further study. Now, just to be fair here, there were quite a few investigators and scientists that participated in the Condon Report, and they were very upset with Condon's conclusion because there were obviously objects that were unexplainable, and they felt necessary of scientific investigation. But Condon, I don't know, apparently under orders from somebody, probably the Air Force. The Air Force didn't want to deal with this anymore, so that's what happened there. During the 1970s, UFO reports continued unabated, and mutilations of cattle also started to appear. In order to suppress such news, men in black, probably CIA, visited radio and TV stations and suggested that they present UFO reports in a comic way, implying that people who made them were all kooks of one sort or another, while cattle mutilations were to be blamed on satanic cults. It was strongly implied that a failure to cooperate could result in the loss of their FCC broadcasting license. Now, actually, I've heard of stuff like that happening before the 70s, actually in the 40s. Actually started in Roswell. It was going on for quite a long time. I don't think that happens anymore. You don't really hear of anything like that. There's no stories that come out like that. But hey, who knows? Anyway, continuing. As the 2000s began, UFO reports continued to increase and more alien craft kept appearing every day. In addition, new technology such as cell phone cameras and more advanced radar on Navy planes and ships yielded reports of even higher quality and credibility. The FBI now had over 10,000 cattle mutilation reports on file, and human abduction therapy groups were springing up in every major city around the country to try to help victims recover. And actually, I believe that those therapy groups were springing up actually since the 80s, from what I understand. Anyway, continuing. In 2017, several videos taken by Navy aircraft were revealed to the public, which showed UFOs maneuvering in ways that clearly exceeded our own capabilities. In addition, a story appeared in the New York Times about a Department of Defense program called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which was allegedly in possession of a body of evidence the military had been collecting about UFOs. This briefly stimulated public curiosity and caused some elected officials to demand answers. As a result, a hearing was held in May of 2022 in which 2 representatives of the military appeared. They repeated the usual explanations, stating that the objects might be drones or balloons and didn't seem to pose any threat to national security. Well, I'm going to stop there for a second. I mean, the reason that, I think what the message is that they're not sure whether they pose a threat to national security or not. They're trying to determine that. They don't know. Anyway, continuing. After further questioning, the witnesses admitted the objects might be extraterrestrial spacecraft, but claimed to have no information about cases which occurred prior to 2004, nor did they know about cattle mutilations, human abductions, crash retrievals, or the like. In the end, the hearing produced absolutely nothing new or useful, and that is, let me just stop there for a second, that is absolutely true. It did not give the public anything. I mean, for them to say that they're not aware of all these other things, human abductions and crashes and mutilations, to say that, that's, I just can't imagine that people in the Pentagon are completely ignorant of these things that go on, that are related, obviously, to these UFOs. Anyway, continuing. And so the cover-up continues. For over 70 years, the military and intelligence services have discredited, humiliated, and threatened American citizens, manipulated the media, and kept the bulk of our elected officials in the dark in order to maintain this incredible level of secrecy. But what could possibly justify such a thing? The idea they simply can't admit we don't control our own airspace is ridiculous. The theory that the oil companies are paying them to conceal some new type of free energy is even more ludicrous. The claim that we have to beat the Russians to reverse engineer alien technology or they might gain control of the planet is yet another bit of total nonsense. The alien technology is thousands of years beyond anything we can reverse engineer. And what would it matter if the Russians knew we were working on it or not? I'm sure they know just as well as we do that it's an impossible job. The only thing we really could have accomplished successfully is the analysis of an alien body, which clearly would have produced some very powerful insights. I suggest that the American people stop waiting for a disclosure that will never come and just examine the evidence and draw their own conclusions. The only explanation that makes sense is that there's something so terrible, horrible, and frightening going on that it would cause a catastrophic social collapse if it became known. And if hearing that our planet is being colonized by a race of alien creatures who feed on human and animal blood isn't sufficient, then the idea that more may be on the way would certainly do it. Okay, yeah, I guess it's scary. He has the perspective that that these things are here, to basically colonize the planet, and basically he doesn't think that there's going to be a disclosure. I'm a little bit more optimistic than he is, but everyone's different and everyone's entitled to their opinion. I agree with him in one sense. If this is the case, right, if these things are here for this purpose, which it actually seems to me when you really think about it, when you put all the evidence together and you really think about it, it makes the most sense. I think this is the most credible, reasoning, the most credible explanation that we have, basically. I don't see anything that comes close to matching this. I mean, anything else that people brought forward never really made any sense, but this one does make sense. That's why they could be here, is to basically colonize this planet. And they're just waiting for the rest of their buddies to arrive. Maybe it takes a long time, and we're talking traveling through, who knows how many miles through space to get here, how many light years, who knows. And that would be, I mean, let's change, let's put the shoe on a different foot here. If it was us trying to go to another world, like say at some point this earth becomes just unbearable for the human race to survive. It gets too hot, and we're all dying. We need to get out of here, and we have the technology to do it. We're going to figure out how to get out of here, but it's going to take a lot of time to get the entire population up and out of here. I mean, it's going to be a lot of ships, a lot of building, a lot of work. I mean, it's just not something that happens overnight. Okay, these things apparently have been with us forever. I mean, for as far as we know, but it seems like since 1947, their presence increased. And it seems like it's been ever increasing since that point. And there's been a lot of weird other anomalies that go along with it that have cropped up over the last 75 years. Okay, there was starts off with first people start seeing humanoids standing out by ships. Then there's cattle mutilations and alien abductions. They've been playing games with our military aircraft and naval vessels. They're seeing a lot over the ocean going in and out of water. Basically the objects they fly around in are transmedium, probably everything. Probably everything they have is probably transmedium. They probably could go into water, atmosphere, air, and space. It's probably the works. They probably all are operating deluxe versions of these craft. And this whole hybridization thing, then that's the big mystery. I mean, what exactly is that all about? I mean, if that's real, and that means there's a lot of people suspect. In fact, I talked about this before. James Fox, the documentary filmmaker who's responsible for pretty good documentary movies about UFOs, including The Phenomenon from 2020, which was great. And he's done this. He's coming out with a new film about something that happened, a crash in South America, and that's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing that. But he actually stated he was talking to some people who, people that he can't say their names, but apparently they're from the Pentagon. It said these things are walking among us, and they're serious about it. They're among us. They know. I mean, there's people. I mean, actually, I would have to guess at this point that our people in our Pentagon understand that these things are among us. So what is that? That's going to play some part in this colonization at some point, right? So it's been going on for generations now. Apparently, this hybridization program, and we know it. We know at least one of them definitely happened in 1957, right? And we know about, and then in the early 60s with the Hills. And it's been, people, it happened to a lot of people, started happening to a lot of people. A lot of people start coming forward about it. Some people, want to keep anonymous, of course. I mean, I could understand how somebody would want to, retain their anonymity when it comes to something like this. So that makes sense. I mean, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who never told anybody about this, that it has happened to. So if that's what's been going on all these generations, I mean, how many, and some of these beings now that there's basically beings among us that are half alien and half human, and they have the same abilities as the humans, and they're probably placed in different strategic points across the globe at this point, or maybe they're not. Maybe they're only at a certain time they'll be deployed. Who knows how this works, right? But what's their purpose? What's their purpose? I mean, are they going to help facilitate this change that's going to come, like some believe? Yeah, and I can understand. Here's the thing, in a way, this statement that we're talking about here from my anonymous friend, it does make a lot of sense. And, the second, even if they don't say this, see, the problem is, this is why I have trouble believing at some points that disclosure will ever happen, because the second somebody from the Pentagon says it might be extraterrestrial, right? Because they never go there, if you ever noticed that. But the second they do go there, right, you're at the top of that, getting over the hump. You're right at the top of the hump. Then the moment they say that, then a lot of people are going to start wondering, and they're going to come up with the same kind of conclusions as my anonymous friend here who sent this statement. And that's the thing. And that's why it's so hard, I mean, it's so hard to disclose this if this is the case. And it probably is, or something like this. It's something bad. It could be something bad that's not good for the human race, for the future of the human race. At the same time, right, we need to face it, right? I mean, what is the good of sitting back all these decades doing nothing, and just because if something does happen, when if this in fact is the case, right, there's going to be a panic one way or the other. You might as well get it over with. This way, maybe the world as a whole could figure something out. Maybe not. I mean, if you're dealing with a race that's hundreds of thousands of years more advanced, or maybe millions of years more advanced than we are, then maybe there is no figuring it out. But I think that's why disclosure is necessary. I understand where my anonymous friend here is coming from when he states that, they're not going to say it because this is the reason, that they're drinking, here the feed. I mean, we shouldn't really be afraid of that. I mean, I've said this before now. If that is the case, we should not be afraid of it. I mean, because look at us. I mean, of course, there's vegetarians and whatnot, but I mean, a lot of us are carnivores. Let's face it. I mean, we're eating hamburgers and hot dogs every day. So, I mean, okay, so these things, I mean, all these animals that we have, our dogs, our cats, they all eat meat, right? So that's no big surprise, really. Okay, if they're killing the cattle now. He suspects that there actually some alien or human mutilations occur where they're draining the blood of humans. Okay, I guess we got to deal with it. I mean, if that's happening, okay, it's happening. That's all part of it. We're all grown up now. We need to talk about it. If that's what this is, we still need to talk about it. Disclosure is still important. So no matter what, I think we need to have this conversation. We need to have disclosure. We need to get it out. I think that's what we're starting to see. It looks very promising right now. I mean, especially with Congress right now, they passed that amendment that will, the whistleblower will give whistleblowers, the ability to come out and say stuff without having to worry about getting arrested. That's great, and once that bill finally passes, within the Senate and then it's signed by the president, then that means, we might start seeing some things. Maybe we won't. But hey, people who have access to this, to some hard evidence, might come forward. We'll just have to see. This person, my anonymous source, doesn't believe that, doesn't think that's going to happen. And maybe he's right. Again, anything that we're talking about here is all pure speculation. I think that's one of the things about, a lot of people out there, right, actually, they talk like indefinites all the time. You see a lot of people out there talking indefinites, like they know this and they know that, and this is what the reality is. There's no such thing as UFOs. There's no such thing as aliens. I mean, that you get that all the time, right? So, and they know for sure, right? They seem, but no, they don't. Nobody knows for sure. I know one thing for sure, because I have the benefit of having seen one of these craft up close. Of course, I talk about that all the time. But a lot of these people just have no idea what they're talking about. And that's why it's important to get, the truth out. So one way or the other, the truth as much as we know of it. I mean, because there's no way, even our military, the people in the Pentagon that's been covering this up for all these decades, they could not know everything at this point. They just could not. So, again, I agree at some points of this statement from my anonymous friend, but I don't know if I agree with all of it. And I guess we're going to find out maybe what will come to pass. At the same time, you should draw your own conclusions. I mean, the evidence is strong. And there should be only one conclusion that you draw, actually. He states here, I suggest that the American people stop waiting for a disclosure that will never come and just examine the evidence and draw their own conclusions. There is only one conclusion. There's something here. The question is, what are they doing here? That's the question. They're here. Take it from me. I'm telling you, they're here. I saw a craft. I saw one of these beings was in my room when I was a kid. There's no doubt about it. And there's just too much evidence to support this, that they are here. But the conclusion you need to draw is, you have to think about, is what he's saying here is, why are they here? Why are they here? They're not here just to fly around, right? They're here to do something else. They're here too long. If this was just some sort of a study, it should have been over a long time ago, right? I mean, if they're just here to take some samples of of different parts of our planet, Earth and plant life and human beings, and test us, they would have been here and gone already. But it doesn't seem like that's the case. They're still here. They're still hanging out. And I assume that probably a good chunk of them are hiding out underneath the ocean somewhere. There's probably motherships, under under the oceans. That's where they are, in space somewhere outside of Earth's atmosphere. Maybe on the dark side of the moon. Maybe hanging out near other planets in our solar system. Who knows? But they're here. They're here.